it's just Martine, and today I'm going to talk about how to successfully complete a 24 in 48 hour readathon. The last time I was doing a 24 in 48 hour readathon, I asked some of my friends in our Discord chat whether or not they'd be interested in this video. So I get that this is a really specific video, but here it is anyway, because at least one person said yes. I've done several 24 and 48s now, and I used to not be successful at them, but now for the past couple of times, I don't want to jinx my role, but for the past couple times that I've done them, I've managed to hit 24 hours of reading in a 48-hour time span. And so I feel like I've kind of gotten into a groove of it where like I know how to set it up to actually get through 24 in 48 hours. And the first few times that I attempted to do this, I was like, I don't actually think this is possible, but I've proven myself wrong a couple times now, so I want to let you in on the secrets that I've learned while doing this, my trial and error, if you will. These things are in no particular order, and I just have like a random list of things to chat with you about, so it's just going to be a chatty little moment, and you can honestly use this to apply it to other situations that are not 24 and 48 hour readathons. Like if you just want to have a reading weekend where you read more, maybe consider some of these things. It doesn't have to be as specific as I'm presenting it. So let's jump into it. The main idea here for me is go in with a plan. It is not enough to say I want to try and read 24 hours in this 48-hour time span. You have not set yourself up for success if you just say like, I'm going to try to do this. Like, I think there has to be some forethought here. So whenever I do it, I think about a couple things. One, I think about what responsibilities do I have this weekend? Typically, to be successful, you should have like no other responsibilities, or alternatively, no responsibilities that you can't do while reading. So for instance, I still have things that I have to get done over the weekend, like I do laundry on Sunday, but I can do that while listening to an audiobook. So even though it's technically a responsibility of mine, I can do it while reading. I find that weekends where I interact with people basically at all, I never succeed in doing my 24 and 48 hour readathons, which is why I think I was never really successful with them when I was at my last university and had like my sister around and people I went and ate meals with, because like during meal times, I'm still reading. That's how I get my 24 and 48. And so before, when I actually took a break to like spend time with people, that took a lot more time out of my 48 hours than I ever realized. And this is tricky if you like live with a partner or something, but even saying like, hey, this weekend we're going to do our own things. Like as long as it's not an every weekend thing and both partners are comfortable about it and know what their responsibilities are for said weekend, then I think there are ways to make that work regardless of actually having friends or people around you, unlike me. This also includes online friends though. Like my friends can usually tell even if I don't explicitly say to them like I'm doing a 24 and 48 this weekend. Bailey will be like, I think Martine's probably doing a 24 and 48 this weekend because I'm quiet. I don't really usually log into reading sprints or anything because the time in between the sprints really adds up. So basically the lesson learned here is like no obligations. Don't plan to do literally anything else but sleep and read. You also have to eat and stuff, but you can do that while reading. So I don't feel like it counts for my separate categories. You cannot read and sleep at the same time. So those are your two separate things. Speaking of sleep, one thing that I like to think about is like, how much sleep do I need? I find that people who try to give up sleep to do some of these more insane reading challenges almost always fail. I think you have to have a regular sleep routine in use and you have to stick with it while you're attempting the reading challenge in order to be successful. Because if you don't get the sleep that your body is used to, you're going to crash. I tend to spend like 10 hours in bed every night, off and on sleeping, depending on how well I sleep that night. So I usually think about like 10 hours every night. So that's 20 hours that I will lose in this 48-hour period. That means I really have to prioritize the time that I'm awake as reading time because I need those 20 hours of sleep. So again, I think telling yourself I'm not going to do my normal sleep pattern just to do this 24 and 48, you're setting yourself up for failure. Another thing that I think about is when to start and end the 48-hour time period. For me, I typically try to base this around my peak levels of attention. I do not focus well at night, and I cannot stay up very long. And because of that, I tend to do my best when I start my 24 and 48s somewhere around 3 p.m., so mid-afternoon. This means that on the Sunday, I will still have plenty of hours in the morning and early afternoon to finish up the hours that I need to do, but it also sets me up on Friday to get some good reading time in. Also, because I know that I read the best in the morning, I get up in the morning with my alarm like I usually do and get myself to reading right then. If I did read better at night, then I would consider staying up later and then sleeping in and waking up later than I do. But because of how my body works, and this goes the same with like deciding how much sleep you're going to get, because of the way my body works, I know that I'm going to do better if I start in the afternoon. This is also related to burnout prevention, right? So it does take a lot of energy to read for 24 hours in a 48-hour time span. So what feels comfortable is having one reading day that is absolutely insane and two other still kind of insane but not nearly as insane reading days. So what this means to me is, in my ideal situation, I'm getting 5 hours on the clock the first night. So from like 3 to 8 p.m. or 4 to 9 p.m. I want 5 hours on the clock the first night. Then I wake up the next day. I know this day is the crazy day. I'm doing over 12 hours of reading on the second day. This is typically an over 1,000 page reading day. On the second day, I aim for anywhere between 13 and 14 hours, and this sets me up to have a last day, well, morning/early afternoon of 6 to 7 hours worth of reading. If I can make my crazy reading day more than 14 hours, all the better. My main goal the first 2 days is to get as many hours away from the last day as possible, because the last day I will be tired and I will not want to read as much. So dangling in front of myself like, you only have 5 more hours to read today and then you will be done, thinking about the fact that I could be done with this challenge before the 48 hours is actually done, very motivating to me. So what burnout prevention looks like for you could be different than me, but again, 5, 13 to 14, and then 6 to 7 hours per day seems to be what I'm all in for. That seems to work just fine for me. I think the biggest game changer for me was when I started really relying on audiobooks to get me through my 24 and 48s. Sitting and reading is boring sometimes, and furthermore, it often is a signal to my body, go to sleep. I get really sleepy while I'm sitting and reading, so sitting and reading is not the answer to me. Getting up, doing things while reading is the answer. So a lot of times I'm doing things that I would normally do on the weekend, again, like I said, laundry or walking to the grocery store, but instead of listening to music or silence and just going about my business without anything, and I'm listening to an audiobook instead. That's valuable time, and it's giving my body and my brain something else to focus on aside from the reading. I recommend having a plan of what types of things you're going to do while listening to audiobooks instead of just being like, yeah, I'll rely on audiobooks. Know how you're going to do that. So for me, being like, I'm going to go run groceries, and while I do that, I'll be listening to an audiobook, or I'm going to do laundry, and while I do that, I'll listen to an audiobook. Or if I want to listen to an audiobook instead of physically reading, I can go outside and go on a walk. If I listen to an audiobook, I can do this, that, the other. I can play a game on my phone. Whatever it is for you, just figure out what you're going to do while you're listening to an audiobook. And it may be that you listen to audiobooks so consistently, you already have that list of things that you can do while listening to an audiobook, but just in case, make sure there's enough stuff there and give it some variety. Don't make it like, I'm only going to do chores while I'm listening to audiobooks. No, put some fun stuff in there too. I'm gonna do color by numbers. I'm going to stretch, I don't know, do something that's interesting. I'm gonna eat a snack. Because if you just make it chores, you're going to hate yourself and you're going to be exhausted and you're not going to do well. I also really like switching things up. I know that not everybody can read multiple books at once. If you can, then I highly recommend doing that. So switching up the genre, the format, the pace of the read. So you might be working on like a longer book and you read a couple of pages of that, but then you switch to a book that you're reading really quickly. But for those of you who cannot read more than one book at once, you can just change it up in other ways. So like you could switch between the audiobook and the physical format, or the physical and the ebook format for the same book. Once you finish a book, really switch it up. Change directions. You just read a big book, switch to a graphic novel. You know, don't make it consistent where you're reading like 5 Robin Hobb books or something. I don't even think it's physically possible to read 5 Robin Hobb books in 24 hours of reading, but you get my exaggeration. Also switch up what your body is doing. So again, getting up and walking. This is not just an audiobook thing. I pace while I walk. If you can't do that, I don't know, stretch, move around a little bit, change your sitting position, change where in your house or apartment you are sitting. I like to go outside and read sometimes. I like to walk to the library and read there. I like to walk to the dining hall, read there, just switching it up constantly so my brain isn't like bored. And again, I think the biggest culprit here is like feeling like falling asleep. So you need to both get enough sleep and then move things up enough that your body isn't getting as sleepy. I forgot to tell you this about audiobooks, but my eyes get really tired reading, and that also helps. So in like the 13, 14-hour reading day, by the end of the day, I'm like, I can't look at anything ever again. That's when I switch to the audiobook. On the note of like Robin Hobb, maybe don't try to binge read long books in something like this. I've done it before where I read like Jade City, and that was fine. I think there were worse dense options for that, but it also wasn't like my best experience. I think my best experiences are when I'm reading like lots of short, quick things and I'm switching between them and I'm finishing lots of books. That sense of accomplishment, I think, really motivates me. So just having like one really long book that I'm getting through doesn't feel as good. And then as for what books you're reading, I particularly recommend that if you're indecisive at all, you go in knowing what you're planning on reading. I have a hard time choosing my next audiobook. So before I start the 24 and 48, I spend the time that I need to picking out a couple audiobooks and downloading them. So then when I start the time or when I finish one of the audiobooks, I don't have to go, oh, I have to scroll through the whole library of audiobooks and take 30 minutes to decide. I just go, okay, on to the next one that I already set up for this. Same with books. I keep a stack of books. This is the stack I'm working through. Pick it up, moving on. Pick it up, moving on. If you're a TBR reader, you can do that. But in general, even if you're a mood reader, a lot of times we'll be indecisive. So be like, if I'm in this mood, I'll read this book. If I'm in this mood, I'll read this book. Like, give yourself some type of plan that you can work with. Even if it's something like you need a prompt to pick it, like then find a prompt generator, generate a prompt, pick a book based off that. Just have something quick to help you move from read to read, because honestly, I think you could lose a lot of time deciding what you're going to start reading next. And that's all I have written down, but I'm trying to rack my brain to see if there's any pearls of wisdom to give you. All right, the number one thing, this is all for fun. So if you really are having a horrible time, stop. I will like push myself through the last few hours of a 24 and 48 where I'm sitting there thinking like, I am tired and I would like to be done with this. But I would never push myself through if I was hating my experience with it and just feeling terrible about it. It's not worth that. It's just a silly little challenge in general reading, like forcing yourself through if you're really not having a good time. I don't endorse it. Remember when you're setting this up, like, yes, it's hard to fit 24 hours in a 48-hour time period just to focus on reading, but like you have to make it fun or you're not going to make it through. I have a lot of fun when I do these, and that's probably the number one reason why I'm successful at it, because I'm having a good time. I look forward to my 24 and 48 weekends because I know it's a whole weekend where I'm just reading and nothing else. And since I've done it so many times before, I know exactly what that weekend is going to look like. So I have this expectation. I can be anticipating that weekend, already knowing what I'm getting myself into. So yeah, I wouldn't expect you to completely get a 24 and 48 on your first go. I actually don't recommend that you do. I think you learn a lot about your process by doing it a couple times without hitting the 24, maybe never hitting the 24. Again, the goal of this type of weekend is to really get yourself to read as much as possible. So 24 and 48 just might never be feasible to you. And that's okay, as long as you're approaching it positively and you're doing it because you want to have fun and you want to read. That's what matters. But yeah, those are my top tips for completing a 24 and 48 hour readathon. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and comment down below. Have you ever tried a 24 and 48 hour readathon? If so, Where did it go wrong? It always does, even if you get the 24 and 48. And what did you learn for next time? And if you have any tips, let me know down below, and subscribe for more reading, writing, and college lifestyle content. And until next time, bye humans, bye!